The day they fired her, 3 parents stood in that office. One of them looked her in the eyes and said, "This school has standards. You don't fit them." For years later, she walked back through those same doors, but this time, she owned them. Before we go any further, hit that like button if you believe karma is real, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We want to see how far this story reaches. Now, let me tell you how it all began. Her name was Camila Santos, 26 years old, first in her family to finish college, degree in education from a public university, scholarships earned through sleepless nights and part-time jobs at coffee shops, where she served people who'd never know her name, but she knew theirs. She studied them, their confidence, their ease, the way they walked through the world like it owed them something, and she promised herself, one day, I'll belong in that world too. Growing up, Camila had watched her mother, Mariana, leave the house every morning at 5. She cleaned office buildings downtown, the kind of buildings with marble lobbies and security guards who never smiled at her. Mariana would come home at 7 in the evening, her knees aching, her hands dry and cracked from chemicals, but she never complained, not once. Instead, she'd sit with Camila at their tiny kitchen table, helping her with homework under a flickering light bulb, saying the same thing every night. Education is the only thing they can't take from you, baby. Remember that. And Camila did remember. She remembered every word, every sacrifice, every moment her mother chose to pay for her textbooks instead of fixing the leaking roof. Every time Mariana smiled through the pain, because she believed her daughter would have a better life. That belief became Camila's fuel. It pushed her through university applications, through scholarship essays written and rewritten 20 times, through nights when she fell asleep with her face pressed against open books in the library. When the acceptance letter came from Riverside Academy, one of the most elite private schools in the city, she cried in the parking lot of the grocery store where she'd just bought rice and beans for the week. She sat in her old car, the one with the broken air conditioning and the passenger door that only opened from the outside, and she sobbed, not from sadness, from disbelief, from the overwhelming weight of a dream becoming real. Tuition at Riverside for $1,500 a month per child. Starting salary for Camila, $3,200. But she didn't care about the irony. She cared about the kids, about teaching, about finally proving she deserved to be in that room. Her first day, she wore a blazer her mother had sewn from scratch, navy blue, perfectly pressed. Mariana had stayed up all night finishing it, her fingers moving carefully over the fabric, making sure every stitch was perfect. When Camila put it on that morning, her mother stood back and looked at her with tears in her eyes. "You look like you belong there," she said. Camila hugged her tight and whispered, "I hope so." She walked through those glass doors of Riverside Academy like she was walking into a dream. The lobby smelled like fresh flowers and expensive perfume. The floors gleamed. Everything felt polished, pristine, untouchable. But dreams, she'd learn, don't always want you in them. The first week was fine. Smiles in the hallways, polite nods. A few teachers invited her to lunch in the faculty lounge, a bright room with leather chairs and a coffee machine that made lattes. They asked her where she was from, what she studied, the usual small talk. Camila answered carefully, sensing that every word was being weighed, every detail cataloged. But by the second week, she started noticing things. The way conversations paused when she entered the teacher's lounge, not abruptly, but subtly, like someone had turned down the volume. The way some parents looked at her during pickup, not rude, just evaluating. Their eyes would scan her from head to toe, lingering a moment too long, and then they'd turn away, without saying hello. One afternoon, a mother approached her in the hallway. The woman wore diamond earrings and carried a handbag that probably cost more than Camila's monthly rent. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "So, Camila," she said, loud enough for the other parents nearby to hear, "where did you go to school? I mean, your undergrad?" Camila felt her stomach tighten, but she kept her voice steady. "State University, full scholarship." The woman nodded slowly, her smile fading just slightly. "Oh, that's great." The word great didn't sound great. It sounded thin, hollow. It sounded like a door closing softly. The other parents exchanged glances, and Camila knew. She knew that in their eyes, she wasn't really one of them. She was someone who had been let in, but not someone who belonged. Still, she pushed forward. She threw herself into her work. She stayed late, planning lessons that were creative and engaging. She learned every student's name within the first week, remembered their birthdays, asked about their hobbies. Her students loved her. They'd run up to her in the hallway, excited to tell her about a book they'd read or a project they'd finished. One little girl, a shy second grader named Sophie, told her one day, "Miss Santos, you're my favorite teacher ever." Camila smiled and hugged her, feeling for a moment like maybe, just maybe, she really did belong there. But 3 months in, something changed. A mother named Mrs. Pemberton requested a meeting with the principal. Subject: concerns about Miss Santos' classroom management. Camila wasn't told what the concerns were. She wasn't invited to the meeting. She only found out about it when she saw Mrs. Pemberton walking out of the principal's office with a satisfied look on her face. 2 days later, Mrs. Pemberton's son, a quiet boy named Lucas, was transferred to another class. When Camila asked the principal, Mr. Whitman, why the transfer had happened, he didn't look at her. He shuffled papers on his desk and said, "Sometimes parents just prefer a different teaching style. It's nothing personal, Camila." She wanted to ask what that meant. What teaching style? What had she done wrong? But the way he dismissed her, the way he kept his eyes on his computer screen, instead of meeting her gaze, told her everything she needed to know. It was personal, and she knew it. She just didn't have the words, or the power, to fight back yet. The transfer felt like a crack in the foundation, small at first, but growing. Other parents started requesting meetings. Whispers spread through the parent community. Camila could feel it in the air, in the way some mothers pulled their children a little closer when they saw her in the hallway, in the way fathers looked past her like she was invisible. She tried to ignore it. She focused on her students, on the ones who still looked at her with bright, trusting eyes. But the weight of it pressed down on her, heavier each day. It happened on a Wednesday, the kind of ordinary day that you never expect to change your life. A 10-year-old boy named Ethan, energetic and always moving, was playing tag during recess. He tripped over his own shoelaces and crashed into a bench where a school-issued tablet had been left. The tablet flew off the bench and hit the concrete. The screen shattered into a spiderweb of cracks. Ethan started crying immediately, afraid he'd be in trouble. Camila knelt down beside him, put a hand on his shoulder, and told him it was okay. Accidents happen. She filled out an incident report, following every step of the protocol she'd been trained on. She notified the front office, sent an email to the tech department, and called Ethan's parents to let them know what had happened. She thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. 2 hours later, the principal's assistant, a thin woman with a tight smile, knocked on her classroom door. "Miss Santos, Mr. Whitman would like to see you." Now, the word now hung in the air like a threat. Camila's stomach dropped. She told her students to read quietly and walk down the hallway in silence. Her heels clicked against marble floors that suddenly felt too clean, too cold, too foreign. The hallway seemed longer than usual, like she was walking toward something inevitable. When she opened the door to the principal's office, her breath caught in her throat. Mr. Whitman sat behind his large wooden desk, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Mrs. Fletcher, the school coordinator, stood off to the side, looking down at her notepad, avoiding eye contact. And then there were the 3 parents, all white, all dressed in expensive clothes, all sitting in chairs arranged in a semicircle, like a jury. One of them was Ethan's father, Mr. Calloway, a real estate developer whose face she'd seen on billboards all over the city. He looked at her with cold, assessing eyes, the kind of eyes that were used to getting what they wanted. Mr. Whitman spoke, without looking at her. "Camila, have a seat." She sat in the only empty chair, directly in the center, facing all of them. The air felt thick, suffocating. "We're here because there have been concerns," Mr. Whitman said. His voice was calm, measured, like he was discussing a budget report instead of her career. Camila's heart pounded. "Concerns about what?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Mr. Calloway leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "My son came home upset today. He said you yelled at him in front of the other kids." Camila shook her head. "I didn't yell at anyone. Ethan had an accident. I filed the report. I followed protocol. I even called you to explain what happened." Mr. Calloway's jaw tightened. "This isn't the first time something's happened in your class, though, is it?" Camila felt her pulse quicken. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Fletcher finally looked up from her notepad. "There have been complaints," she said quietly, almost apologetically, "about your tone, your approach. Some parents feel their children aren't being challenged enough. Others feel you're too strict." Camila's voice rose slightly, frustration breaking through her careful composure. "My approach? I have the highest test scores in my grade level. My students are engaged. They're learning. What exactly is the problem here?" Mr. Calloway cut her off, his voice sharp. "Look, Miss Santos, No disrespect, but this is a premium institution. Parents pay a lot of money to send their kids here. They have certain expectations, and frankly, some of us feel like you don't quite fit what we're looking for. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. The words hung in the air like smoke. Camila could barely speak. What does that mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Calloway looked at her coldly, his eyes hard. You know what it means. And she did. She knew exactly what he meant. The room spun slightly. She felt her hands trembling in her lap. She wanted to scream. She wanted to stand up and demand to know what exactly she had done wrong. But she couldn't, because she knew that no matter what she said, it wouldn't matter. They had already decided. Mr. Whitman cleared his throat, breaking the silence. Camila, I think it's best if you take a few days off. Paid, of course. We'll reassess the situation after that. Camila looked at him, searching his face for any hint of support, any sign that he would stand up for her. But there was nothing, just a blank corporate mask. Reassess what? She asked. No one answered. The silence was louder than any words. She stood up, her legs shaky, and walked toward the door. She didn't look back. She didn't say goodbye. She just left. And she didn't cry until she got to her car. She sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, her vision blurred with tears. She replayed the meeting over and over in her mind, dissecting every word, every look, trying to understand what she could have done differently. But deep down she knew there was nothing she could have done, because the problem wasn't her teaching. It wasn't her tone or her approach. The problem was that she existed in a space where people like her weren't supposed to be. 3 days later, she received an email. Subject, employment termination notice. Reason, administrative restructuring. The words were cold, impersonal, devoid of any acknowledgement of who she was or what she had given to that school. No hearing, no appeal, no goodbye to her students. Just gone. She read the email 3 times, each time hoping the words would change, but they didn't. She closed her laptop and sat in the dark. For 2 months, Camila didn't leave her apartment. She didn't answer calls, didn't check emails, didn't even open the blinds. The sunlight felt too bright, too accusatory, like it was reminding her of everything she'd lost. She spent her days on the couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying the meeting in her mind, torturing herself with what-ifs. What if she had said something different? What if she had been quieter, smaller, less visible? What if she had just accepted the first transfer request and moved on? Her mother, Mariana, finally came over unannounced. She used the spare key Camila had given her and walked in to find her daughter sitting on the floor in the dark, still in pajamas at 3 in the afternoon. The apartment smelled stale. Dishes were piled in the sink. Mariana's heart broke, but she didn't show it. She sat down on the floor next to Camila and said firmly, "Get up." Camila's voice was flat, lifeless. "Why?" "Because I didn't raise you to quit." Camila's eyes filled with tears. "They didn't want me, Ma. They made that very clear." Mariana reached over and took her daughter's face in her hands. "Baby, listen to me. I cleaned floors for 30 years. You think people wanted me there? You think they saw me as a person? Most days, I was invisible, just another pair of hands scrubbing their dirt. But you know what I did? I showed up every single day, and I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I refused to let them break me." She looked into Camila's eyes, her voice strong and unwavering. "So you're going to get up, you're going to finish that master's degree, and you're going to show them what they lost. Not because you need their approval, but because you need to know your own worth." Camila cried in her mother's arms that day, but something inside her shifted. The pain was still there, raw and burning, but alongside it, something else began to grow. Determination. And Camila did get up. She enrolled in a master's program in educational equity and social justice at a university 2 hours away. She drove there twice a week, sitting through classes that challenged her, inspired her, made her see the system for what it really was. She wrote her thesis on systemic racism in private education, pouring all of her pain and anger and hope into those pages. It was titled, "The Invisible Barrier: How Elite Schools Maintain Exclusion Through Policy and Practice." Her professors praised it. One of them told her, "This needs to be published. This needs to be read." So she started a blog. She wrote essays, raw and honest, about what it felt like to be the only black teacher in a white institution, about the microaggressions, the doubt, the constant pressure to be twice as good to be considered half as worthy. She posted them on LinkedIn. She shared them on Twitter, and people started reading. One of her posts, titled "The Teacher Who Didn't Fit," went viral. 50,000 shares in 3 days. National media outlets picked it up. Suddenly, Camila wasn't just a fired teacher. She was a voice for all the educators who had been silenced, marginalized, pushed out. Universities invited her to speak. Education conferences flew her across the country. She stood on stages in front of hundreds of people and told her story. And every time she spoke, she saw faces in the audience, nodding, crying, recognizing their own pain in her words. She didn't get paid much for those early talks, sometimes nothing at all, but she didn't care. She was building something bigger than a paycheck. She was building a legacy. 2 years later, armed with her master's degree, a growing platform, and a fire that wouldn't go out, Camila founded her own consulting firm, Equity in Education. She helped schools audit their hiring practices, review their curricula for bias, and train their staff on unconscious prejudice. Her clients ranged from public schools struggling with funding to charter schools trying to improve, and yes, even private schools, expensive ones, the kind that suddenly cared about diversity after years of ignoring it because lawsuits and bad press had finally forced their hand. Her reputation grew. She was featured in education journals, invited to panels, asked to contribute to policy discussions. She became someone people listened to, someone whose opinion mattered, and through it all, she never forgot where she came from. She never forgot the little girl who used to sit at a kitchen table under a flickering light, believing that education could change everything. Then, on a Tuesday morning in September, 4 years after she'd been fired, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. She was in the middle of preparing a presentation for a school district in Chicago, but some instinct she couldn't explain, told her to pick up. A professional voice on the other end said, "Good morning. Is this Camila Santos?" She answered, speaking. The voice continued, "My name is Patricia Harmon. I'm the new board chair at Riverside Academy." Camila's blood ran cold. She hadn't heard that name in years. She'd worked hard to move past it, to build something new. And now, here it was again, pulling her back. Patricia continued, "I know this is unexpected, and I understand if you hang up right now, but I wanted to reach out personally. The school is going through some major changes. There have been allegations, multiple discrimination lawsuits, media scrutiny. The board conducted an investigation and voted to remove Mr. Whitman as principal. Several staff members were let go. We're rebuilding from the ground up." Camila stayed silent, her mind racing. Patricia continued, "We're looking for someone to lead the school into a new era. Someone with credibility. Someone who represents real change. Not just performative diversity, but someone who actually understands what it means to create an inclusive environment." Camila finally spoke. "And you're calling me?" Patricia's voice was earnest. "Yes, we've followed your work. We've read your articles, watched your talks. The board was unanimous. We'd like to offer you the position of head of school. Full authority to restructure as you see fit. Competitive salary. Complete support from the board." Camila sat down slowly. Her hands were shaking. She didn't know if it was anger or shock, or something else entirely. "How do I know this isn't just another PR move?" she asked. Patricia sighed. "You don't. Not yet. But I'm asking you to consider it anyway. Because those kids deserve better. And honestly, so do you. You deserve to come back on your terms." Camila hung up without saying yes or no. She sat in her office, staring at the wall, her heart pounding. She called her mother. "They want me back," she said. Her mother asked carefully, "As what?" "As the boss. As the head of school." There was a long pause. Then her mother asked, "What are you going to do?" Camila said, "I don't know, Ma. I don't know if I can walk back into that place." Her mother's voice was gentle but firm. "Yes, you do know. You've always known. You didn't build all of this just to run from the hardest fight." Camila stared at her reflection in the window of her office. She could see the city lights below, the world she'd built for herself, the freedom she'd earned. She could say no, walk away, keep building her firm, never look back. It would be the safe choice, the easy choice. Or she could walk back into that building, the one that had broken her, and rebuild it with her own hands. She could turn the place that represented her greatest pain into something beautiful, something just. She picked up her phone and called Patricia back. "I'll do it," she said, "but I'm doing it my way. No compromises, no halfway measures. If I walk through those doors, everything changes." Patricia's voice was relieved. "Deal. When can you start?" Her first day back, Camila wore the same navy blazer her mother had sewn 4 years earlier. It still fit perfectly. She stood in front of her mirror that morning, looking at herself, remembering the young woman who had walked into Riverside Academy for the first time, hopeful and naive, She wasn't that woman anymore. She was stronger, wiser, and she was ready. She walked through those glass doors again. The lobby looked the same marble floors, the same fresh flowers, the same expensive perfume in the air. But this time, she didn't walk like she was entering a dream. She walked like she owned it, because she did. The staff had been called to gather in the auditorium for her introduction. As she walked down the aisle toward the stage, she scanned the faces. Some she recognized, teachers who had been kind to her, others who had looked away, and in the back row, sitting stiffly with his arms crossed, was Mr. Calloway, the man who'd told her she didn't fit. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he looked away first. Camila stepped onto the stage and stood at the podium. She didn't have notes. She didn't need them. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm and clear. "My name is Camila Santos. Some of you remember me, some of you don't. Either way, we're starting fresh today." She paused, letting her words settle. "This school has a reputation, prestige, legacy, tradition. But legacy means nothing if it's built on exclusion. Tradition means nothing if it protects injustice." Silence filled the auditorium. You could hear people shifting in their seats. So here's what's going to change. In her first 90 days, Camila moved like a force of nature. She reviewed every personnel file. She sat in on classes. She talked to students, really listened to them. And then she acted. She fired 3 staff members who had documented histories of bias and complaints that had been ignored. She implemented a zero-tolerance policy for racial discrimination, with clear consequences and transparent reporting. She opened 50 full scholarships for students from low-income families, recruiting from public schools across the city. She hired a diverse teaching staff, ensuring that 45% of the faculty were people of color, so that every child in that building could see themselves reflected in their teachers. She redesigned the entire curriculum. African American history wasn't an elective anymore. It was required. Indigenous studies, global perspectives, literature from authors of every background. She brought in guest speakers, activists, artists, people who had stories the students needed to hear. She created a student equity council, led by students of color, giving them a real voice in school policies. And she made it clear, in every meeting, every memo, every decision, that Riverside Academy was no longer going to be a place where only certain people felt welcome. Not everyone was happy. Some parents withdrew their children. A few teachers resigned. Mr. Calloway pulled his son out of the school within a month, citing philosophical differences. But for every family that left, 2 more applied. Families who had never considered Riverside before because they didn't think their children would belong there. Families who saw what Camila was building and wanted to be part of it. 6 months later, Riverside Academy was featured in a national documentary about educational reform. The school that once fired a black teacher for not fitting in was now being held up as a model for inclusion and equity. News outlets called it a transformation. Camila called it accountability. At the end of the school year, the school held its annual gala. It was a tradition, a fundraising event where wealthy donors wrote big checks and patted themselves on the back. But this year, it felt different. The room was more diverse. The conversations were different. And when Camila was introduced as the keynote speaker, the applause was genuine. She stood at the podium in a deep blue dress, looking out at the crowd of parents, donors, board members, and staff. And there, in the front row, she saw him, Mr. Calloway. He had been invited by a board member who didn't know the history. He sat with his arms crossed, his face unreadable. Camila took a breath and began. "For years ago," she said, her voice steady and strong, "I sat in an office upstairs. A man told me I didn't fit the standards of this school." The room went completely silent. People stopped eating, stopped talking. She continued. "He was right." A few people shifted uncomfortably, unsure where she was going. "I didn't fit the old standards, because the old standards were wrong." Applause began, soft at first, then building. "I didn't fit a system that valued pedigree over character, wealth over worth, comfort over justice." The applause grew louder. "I came back here not for revenge, not to humiliate anyone. I came back to build something better, not just for me, but for every kid who's ever been told they don't belong." She looked directly at Mr. Calloway, holding his gaze. "Because the truth is, we all belong. Every child, every teacher, every family. And if you can't see that, if you can't accept that, then you're the one who doesn't fit. Not here, not anymore." The room erupted in applause. People stood. Some were crying, and Mr. Calloway, his face red, stood up stiffly and walked out. The doors closed behind him with a soft click. Camila didn't watch him leave. She just smiled and finished her speech. A week later, a little girl named Maya, 7 years old with bright yellow ribbons in her braids, came up to Camila after a school assembly. "Miss Santos?" Camila knelt down to her level. "Yes, sweetheart." Maya looked at her with wide, hopeful eyes. "When I grow up, I want to be just like you." Camila felt her throat tighten. She reached out and gently touched Maya's cheek. "You're going to be even better," she said softly, "because you're growing up in a world where people like us get to lead. And that changes everything." That night, Camila sat alone in her office, the same office where she'd been humiliated 4 years earlier, the same desk where Mr. Whitman had sat when he dismissed her without a second thought. She looked at the nameplate on the door, Dr. Camila Santos, head of school. The letters gleamed in the soft lamplight. She thought about the girl she used to be, the one who cried in parking lots and sat in the dark for 2 months. She thought about her mother's hands, rough and strong, holding her face and telling her to get up. She thought about every person who had doubted her, dismissed her, told her she didn't belong. And she smiled, not because she'd won, not because she'd proven them wrong, but because she'd transformed the very place that tried to erase her. She'd taken her pain and built something beautiful from it, something that would outlast her, something that would change lives. Revenge wasn't her goal. It never had been. Justice was. And justice, she'd learned, doesn't come from tearing others down. It doesn't come from bitterness or anger. It comes from building something they can't ignore, something so powerful, so undeniable, that it changes the rules of the game forever. Once, they told her she didn't belong. Now, they walk through the doors she leads. And those doors are open to everyone,